The last time Emily Carter stood in front of that house, she was holding a suitcase in one hand and her daughter's trembling fingers in the other. 3 years later, the same house filled a projection screen at the front of a quiet auction room in Hartford, Connecticut, its white columns glowing beneath the flat winter light of a real estate photograph, its black shutters freshly painted, its red oak door polished until it looked almost innocent. Emily sat near the back with Noah on her left and Lily on her right. Both children dressed carefully, not richly, but with the kind of neatness that came from a mother who had ironed their clothes before sunrise because she wanted them to feel ready for whatever this day might become. The room smelled of coffee, wool coats, and old paper. Men in navy suits whispered over folders. A woman from the bank adjusted her glasses. Somewhere near the front, a pen clicked again and again, sharp as a tiny clock. Emily kept her hands folded over the leather folder in her lap, her breathing slow, her face still. On the screen was 214, Hawthorne Lane, the house Daniel Whitmore had once called too good for her, the house where Noah had learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where Lily had taped paper snowflakes to the kitchen windows, where Emily had believed, foolishly and completely, that love could make a place permanent. It had taken only one rainy night to prove her wrong. Now Daniel sat in the first row, shoulders squared beneath a charcoal suit that had seen better tailoring, his jaw tight, his wedding ring gone, his confidence worn thin around the edges. He had arrived early, of course. Men like Daniel liked to be seen arriving before the rest of the room, as if punctuality could still pass for power. He had not noticed Emily at first. He had been too busy speaking softly to his attorney, too busy pretending the auction of his former home was merely a business inconvenience, not a public unraveling. Then Lily shifted beside Emily, and the small silver charm on her keychain made the faintest sound against the metal leg of her chair. Daniel turned. For one suspended second, his eyes landed on Emily, then on Noah, then on Lily, and something moved across his face too quickly to name. Surprise, irritation, shame, maybe, though Emily no longer trusted him with emotions that generous. He looked at her as if she had walked into a room where she did not belong. That almost made her smile. Almost. The auctioneer cleared his throat, and the low conversations faded into a hush. On the screen, the house waited, perfect and silent, hiding every echo it had ever kept. Emily felt Noah's hand slip into hers beneath the folder. His palm was warm, but his fingers were stiff. He remembered. Children always remembered the things adults wished they could soften. Lily, too, stared at the screen without blinking, her old house charm tucked inside her fist like a secret she had carried too long. Daniel's gaze stayed on them, uncertain now, searching for the old Emily, the woman who would lower her eyes, swallow her hurt, and make herself small for the comfort of the room. But that woman had been left behind on a wet driveway with a broken suitcase wheel and 2 frightened children. The woman sitting here had built herself back in silence, paycheck by paycheck, signature by signature, closing by closing, until even her grief had learned discipline. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer began, his voice smooth and formal. We are here for the final sale of the property located at 214 Hawthorne Lane. A page turned. A chair creaked. Daniel faced forward again, but Emily saw the tension gather at the back of his neck. He thought she had come to watch him lose. He thought this was sentiment, maybe bitterness, maybe the small revenge of a woman who had once been escorted out of her own life. He had no idea. Emily lowered her eyes to the folder in her lap, to the documents already signed, the bid already accepted, the truth waiting quietly beneath her fingertips. The last time she came to Hawthorne Lane, Daniel had taken the keys from her hand. Today, she had come back to return them to her children. The house on the screen looked smaller than Emily remembered, which was strange because memory had spent 3 years making it enormous. In her mind, 214, Hawthorne Lane had become less like a home and more like a courthouse, a place that had judged her without letting her speak. But in the auction room, flattened into a photograph and framed by numbers, square footage, lot size, assessed value, unpaid liens, it was suddenly just wood, glass, brick, and debt. The red oak door, the same door that had once closed behind Daniel while rain soaked through Noah's sneakers, looked almost ordinary under the bank's fluorescent projector. Emily stared at it until the edges blurred, not from tears, but from the force of holding them back. Lily leaned against her side, small and warm, her white cardigan brushing Emily's sleeve. "Is that still our tree?" she whispered, pointing at the tall maple near the driveway. Emily followed her gaze. The tree was bare now, its branches thin against the pale sky, but she could still see it in October, burning orange, leaves scattered across the lawn like pieces of a sunset. She remembered Noah at 6 years old trying to rake them into a pile twice his size. She remembered Lily, only 3, wearing red rain boots on the wrong feet, laughing so hard she fell backward into the leaves. She remembered standing at the kitchen window with a mug of coffee gone cold in her hands, watching them play while Daniel took a business call in the next room, his voice smooth and important, already drifting away from the life they had built. "Yes," Emily said softly. "That is still the tree." Noah did not speak. He sat straight in his chair, wearing the navy blazer he hated because the sleeves felt stiff, his eyes fixed not on the tree, but on the second-floor window above the porch. His old room. Emily knew because she had avoided looking at it herself. It had been painted blue the summer before everything fell apart. A bright, hopeful blue Noah had chosen from a hardware store sample card after Daniel promised him a baseball shelf and glow-in-the-dark stars. The shelf had never been built. The stars had stayed in their package. By then, Daniel had been coming home later, answering messages with his phone tilted away, smiling at things that never seemed to include his family. At the front of the room, the auctioneer continued listing terms in a steady professional voice. Minimum deposit. Closing period. Transfer conditions. Emily heard each word, but beneath them another sound rose in her memory, the old house breathing around her. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the third stair, Lily singing to herself in the bathtub, Noah bouncing a rubber ball against the garage wall until Daniel snapped that some people needed quiet to think. She had once known every sound that house made. She had known where the afternoon sun fell on the living room floor, which window stuck in July, which cabinet smelled faintly of cinnamon because Lily had spilled a jar there and Emily had never fully managed to clean it out. Daniel had never understood that a house was not owned by the person whose name sat on the deed. A house belonged to whoever remembered where the children hid during thunderstorms, whoever knew which corner needed a night light, whoever stayed awake counting bills at the kitchen table so the lights would still be on in the morning. Daniel shifted in the front row, and his attorney bent close to murmur something. Emily watched the side of his face, the familiar line of his jaw, the controlled expression he used when pretending not to be cornered. Once, that expression had frightened her. It had meant a long conversation later, a careful correction of everything she had done wrong, a reminder that gratitude was expected from women who had been given beautiful lives. Now it only looked tired. The house on the screen changed to an interior photograph, and the room around Emily seemed to fall away. The foyer appeared, polished and empty, the staircase curving upward beneath the chandelier Daniel had chosen, because he said it made the entryway look impressive. But Emily saw past the shine. She saw a tiny pencil mark hidden behind the coat closet door, where Noah's height had been measured on his 7th birthday. She saw the faint scratch near the baseboard from Lily's doll carriage. She saw the place on the floor where her suitcase had tipped over the night Daniel told them to leave. Lily's fingers tightened around the old house charm in her palm. Noah swallowed hard, his throat moving with the effort of staying composed. Emily placed one hand over each of theirs, steadying them both, and felt the weight of what this day truly was. Not a purchase, not a victory, a return to the scene of a wound, with enough strength to decide what it would mean now. The memory came back through the shape of the foyer, sharp enough that Emily could almost smell the rain again. 3 years earlier, the house had been glowing from within when she came home with the children after Noah's school concert, the windows warm and golden, the porch lights cutting pale circles into the storm. She had thought, for one foolish second, that Daniel had remembered to leave them on for her. Then she saw the luggage by the door, not packed carefully, not with kindness, but dragged from closets and drawers, coats folded over shoes, Lily's stuffed rabbit jammed sideways into an open tote, Noah's school folder bent beneath a stack of sweaters. Daniel stood in the entryway with one hand in his pocket, his face calm in the way it became calm when he had already made a decision and expected everyone else to adjust themselves around it. Behind him, Vanessa Blake waited near the staircase in a cream coat, her blonde hair tucked neatly behind one ear, her eyes moving over Emily with the cool patience of someone inspecting a room before redecorating it. Noah was the first to understand. He stopped beside Emily, still wearing the little blue tie he had chosen for the concert, his paper program slowly wrinkling in his fist. Lily clung to Emily's leg, confused by the suitcases, by the sound of rain drumming against the roof, by the strange woman standing beneath the chandelier where their family photographs used to hang. "Daniel," Emily said, and even now, sitting in the auction room years later, she remembered how small her voice had sounded in that beautiful entryway. He did not step aside. He did not soften. He told her the arrangement was temporary, then corrected himself and said it was necessary. He said the divorce papers would explain the rest. He said the house was under his name, his financing, his family trust, his future. He spoke in clean, polished sentences, the kind that left no fingerprints. Emily listened while rainwater slid from the children's jackets onto the marble floor. She thought of the birthday cakes baked in that kitchen, the nights she had stayed up with fevers, the curtains she had hemmed by hand, because Daniel said custom work was wasteful unless guests would notice. She thought of every room she had filled with care, only to learn that care did not count as ownership. Vanessa looked toward the front door, then at her watch, as if Emily was an appointment running late. "It is better if this happens tonight," Daniel said. "The children need stability, not confusion." The word stability landed so quietly and so cruelly that Emily could not answer. Noah looked up at his father, waiting for some sign that this was a misunderstanding, that he was still wanted inside the house with the blue bedroom and the unfinished baseball shelf. Daniel avoided his eyes. That was the moment Emily stopped trying to save the marriage. Not when she saw Vanessa. Not when Daniel's attorney sent the first letter. Not when the bank accounts changed and passwords disappeared. It was when her son learned, without a word, that a father could look away. Emily bent down, zipped Lily's raincoat to her chin, and picked up the tote with the stuffed rabbit. Her hand shook once, only once, before she forced it still. She would not give Daniel the scene he expected. She would not let Vanessa remember her as a woman pleading under a chandelier. Outside, the driveway shone black beneath the storm, and the suitcase wool caught on the brick step, spilling a few of Noah's books into a shallow puddle. Daniel reached past her and dropped the house key into her open palm, then seemed to reconsider. "You will not need that," he said, and took it back. But an older spare key, the one shaped like a small brass heart, slipped from the side pocket of Lily's tote and landed near the porch railing. No one noticed except Lily. Emily was busy gathering wet books. Noah was staring at the closed door. Daniel had already turned away. Lily crouched silently, picked up the key, and hid it inside her mitten. Later that night, in a roadside motel 15 miles away, when the children were finally asleep under thin white blankets, Emily found the little brass heart on the nightstand beside Lily's juice box. She held it in her palm until the edges pressed into her skin. It opened nothing now. It proved nothing in court. It could not protect them from gossip, debt, or the long cold weeks ahead. But it was a witness. It remembered what Daniel wanted erased. Back in the auction room, Emily blinked once, and the foyer photograph sharpened again on the screen. Lily's hand was still closed around that same old key charm, now polished by years of being carried everywhere. Emily looked at Daniel's rigid back in the front row and felt, not anger, but a stillness deeper than anger. He had taken the door from them that night. He had not understood that Lily had carried away the memory of how to open it. The motel room smelled of old carpet, lemon cleaner, and the faint metallic chill of rainwater drying on their coats. A highway hummed beyond the thin curtains, steady and indifferent, while headlights slid across the ceiling in pale stripes every few seconds. Emily sat on the edge of the bed closest to the door, still wearing her damp sweater, her shoes placed neatly beside the heater because order was the only thing she could control. Noah and Lily lay under the same blanket, their small bodies curled toward each other like they were trying to become one brave thing. For a long while, Emily thought they were asleep. Then Noah spoke into the dark. "Did Dad stop loving us too?" The question was so quiet that it seemed to belong more to the room than to him. Emily closed her eyes. There were questions a mother could answer with a glass of water, a clean bandage, a night light in the corner. This was not one of them. This question had no safe shape. If she lied, he would know. If she told the truth too sharply, some part of him might carry it forever. She turned toward him slowly, careful not to let the bed springs complain beneath her weight. Noah's eyes were open, shining in the dim orange glow from the parking lot. Lily was awake too, though she pretended not to be, one hand tucked beneath her pillow where Emily knew the little brass key was hidden. "Your father made choices," Emily said, choosing every word like she was crossing ice. "Those choices hurt us, but they do not decide what you are worth." Noah stared at her, still waiting for the answer beneath the answer. Emily reached out and brushed a wet strand of hair from his forehead. "Love should not make children wonder if they are allowed to come home." His mouth trembled, but he nodded as if he understood more than any 9-year-old should. Lily rolled over then, her cheeks flushed from crying earlier, her stuffed rabbit pressed beneath her chin. "Are we homeless?" she asked. The word was too big for her small voice. Emily felt something inside her bend, but not break. She looked around the motel room with its buzzing lamp, chipped dresser, and paper cups stacked beside the sink. It was not home. It was not even close. But her children were watching her face, learning from it whether the world had ended. So Emily took a breath deep enough to hurt and made her expression gentle. "No," she said. "We are between doors." Lily frowned, considering this with the solemn seriousness of a child who still believed words could become real if her mother said them carefully enough. What door comes next? Emily did not know. She did not know how much money remained after the legal fees. She did not know whether Daniel would delay support just to remind her he still could. She did not know how to rebuild a life with 2 children, 3 suitcases, and a heart that felt like it had been left out in the rain. But she knew she could not hand them fear and call it honesty. She moved between them and pulled them both into her arms. Noah resisted for 1 second, because he was at the age where needing comfort embarrassed him, then folded against her anyway. Lily's hand crept from beneath the pillow, and Emily felt the cool press of the little brass key against her wrist. "One day," Emily whispered, her voice barely louder than the rain tapping the window, "you will have a door no one can close on you." Noah breathed in unevenly. Lily's fingers tightened around the key. "Promise?" she asked. Emily looked at the dark television screen across from the bed and saw their reflection there, small and blurred. 3 figures holding on beneath a motel blanket while trucks passed in the night. She had made promises before in a house with polished floors and framed family portraits. Promises built on a marriage she thought was solid. This promise was different. It had no witness, no ring, no chandelier above it. Only 2 tired children and a mother with nothing left to lose except the belief that she could still protect them. "I promise," Emily said. And in the years that followed, through overdue bills, secondhand coats, school lunches packed before sunrise, and nights when exhaustion made her hands ache, she would return to that moment again and again. Not because it was beautiful. It was not. It was cold and plain and unfair. But it was the first brick. Before the jobs, before the classes, before the contracts and the quiet climb back toward Hawthorne Lane, there was that motel room, that little brass key, and a promise made in the dark to 2 children who had deserved a better door. By Sunday morning, Daniel Whitmore had already rewritten the story. That was the thing about men like Daniel. They did not simply make choices, they polished them until they looked reasonable. By the time Emily carried the last damp suitcase into a small weekly rental behind a grocery store in East Hartford, Daniel was telling people that the separation had been mutual, that Emily had become difficult, emotional, impossible to reassure. He said it with tired eyes and a careful sigh, standing beside the kitchen island at Hawthorne Lane while Vanessa arranged white roses in Emily's favorite blue vase. He told neighbors she had taken the children to give everyone space. He told business partners the divorce was painful but necessary. He told his mother that Emily had never really adjusted to the pressures of his world. Every version made him sound patient. Every version made Emily sound unstable. And because he said it from inside the beautiful house, wearing a pressed shirt with the porch lights glowing behind him, people believed him more easily than they would have believed a woman counting dollars at a motel vending machine. Within 2 weeks, the neighborhood had learned how to look away. Mrs. Keller from across the street, who had once brought Lily pink cupcakes on her birthday, sent a short message saying she hoped the children were doing well, but did not ask where they were sleeping. Daniel's golf friend Patrick told a mutual acquaintance that Emily had always seemed fragile. Another woman from the school fundraiser whispered that it was sad, of course, but maybe Daniel needed someone who could keep up. Emily heard pieces of it through forwarded messages, awkward silences, and the sudden absence of invitations. Her name, once written on charity committees and holiday cards, became something people lowered their voices to say. At Hawthorne Lane, Vanessa moved quickly. She replaced the curtains in the dining room, removed the children's drawings from the refrigerator, and had the family photographs taken down before the frames could leave pale rectangles on the walls. She hosted a brunch 3 Saturdays after Emily left, serving smoked salmon, fruit, and mimosas beneath the same chandelier where Lily had once hung paper snowflakes. Guests parked along the curb and walked past the maple tree without seeming to notice the 2 small bicycle marks still scratched into the driveway. Daniel stood at Vanessa's side, accepting sympathy as if he had survived something noble. He gave a small speech near the fireplace, thanking everyone for their discretion during a private family transition. Emily was not there, but she heard about it from Jessica Miller, the only friend from the old life who still called without sounding guilty. Jessica's voice shook with anger over the phone. "He is making himself the victim, Em. He is acting like you abandoned him." Emily stood in the rental's narrow kitchen, one hand pressed against the counter, watching Noah help Lily pour cereal into chipped bowls at the tiny table. The morning light came through plastic blinds and thin, broken lines. "Let him talk," she said. The calm in her own voice surprised her. Jessica went quiet for a moment. "You do not have to be graceful about this." Emily looked at her children. Noah was pretending not to listen. Lily had tucked the little brass key beside her spoon, as if it belonged at every breakfast now. "I am not being graceful," Emily said softly. "I am being careful." Careful meant saving every receipt. Careful meant answering Daniel's emails with dates, times, and no emotion. Careful meant smiling at the school secretary when she had to explain the new address, even though the woman's eyes flickered with pity. Careful meant letting Daniel own the room for a while, because Emily was learning that public stories were loud, but documents lasted longer. Still, there were nights when the unfairness pressed down so heavily that she had to stand outside on the cracked walkway behind the rental just to breathe. She would look toward the west, not because she could see Hawthorne Lane from there, but because her body seemed to know where the old house was. She imagined Vanessa walking through the rooms, Daniel laughing with guests, neighbors admiring the fresh flowers, everyone accepting the new arrangement because it was easier than asking what had happened to the woman and 2 children who used to live there. But inside the rental, Noah taped his first spelling test to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like an apple. Lily drew a crooked house with a red door and 3 stick figures holding hands in front of it. Emily stood before that drawing for a long time. Daniel could have the chandelier, the polished floors, the brunches, and the story. Emily had the truth. And though truth did not pay rent or stop whispers in grocery store aisles, it had weight. It could be carried. It could be stored. It could become evidence. One day, she promised herself, her children would not have to wonder which version of their lives the world believed. One day, the house that had been used to erase them would have to remember their names. The first apartment Emily found after the weekly rental sat above a 24-hour laundromat on a narrow street in East Hartford, where the sidewalk cracked around stubborn weeds, and the air always carried the warm, damp smell of detergent. It was not the kind of place Daniel's friends would have entered without checking the locks on their cars, but to Emily, it meant a lease with her own name on it, a mailbox, key, and a door that closed because she chose to close it. The stairs groaned under every step. The hallway light flickered when it rained, and in winter the old windows leaked cold air so steadily that Lily slept in wool socks and Noah kept a folded towel along the sill. But there was laughter there, real laughter, not the careful kind that used to rise and fall around Daniel's moods. There were pancakes on Sunday mornings, shaped badly into stars. There were library books stacked on milk crates, spelling words taped to the refrigerator, and Lily's drawings covering the beige walls until the apartment looked less rented and more claimed. Emily worked wherever she could at first. She answered phones at a small insurance office 3 days a week, helped a local attorney organize case files in the evenings, and took weekend shifts at a home goods store where her feet ached by closing time. At night, after the children were asleep, she sat at the tiny kitchen table with a secondhand laptop, studying real estate contracts, foreclosure timelines, property liens, and finance terms that once would have made her feel foolish. She copied definitions into a spiral notebook in neat blue ink. Escrow, deed, judgment, redemption period, equity. Words that had once belonged to men in offices now became tools she could hold. Sometimes her head dipped forward from exhaustion, and she would wake to the buzz of the refrigerator and the blue glow of the screen, her coffee cold beside her hand. But each time she wanted to quit, her eyes moved to the small brass key hanging from a pushpin above the table. Lily had placed it there herself, calling it their remembering key. Emily never corrected her. The key opened nothing, but it kept a promise alive. Money was measured differently in that apartment. $5 meant milk, bread, and apples if Emily chose carefully. $20 meant Noah could go on the class field trip without pretending he did not want to. $50 meant the electric bill would not sit unopened for another week. Emily learned to stretch every paycheck until it felt almost like an art. She bought coats in July from clearance racks, packed lunches before sunrise, cut coupons with a precision that made Noah tease her gently and call her the commander of cereal. She smiled when he said it because it meant he still knew how to joke. There were hard evenings, of course. Evenings when Lily asked why Dad never came upstairs, though he knew where they lived. Evenings when Noah grew quiet after seeing Daniel's new photographs online, the old house shining behind Vanessa's parties as if no children had ever left their fingerprints on the glass. Emily did not speak badly of Daniel. She refused to feed bitterness to children already carrying enough. Instead, she made their world steady in small ways. Homework at 6. Dinner at 7. Stories at 8. A kiss on each forehead, every night, no matter how tired she was. Stability, she discovered, was not marble floors or a two-car garage. It was showing up again and again until children stopped checking whether you would leave. Months became a year. The apartment remained small, but Emily began to change inside it. Her shoulders straightened. Her voice steadied on phone calls with Daniel's attorney. Her notebook filled with questions sharper than fear. When the local attorney offered her more hours because she had reorganized his property records better than anyone he had hired before, Emily accepted without apologizing. When a client complimented the clarity of her title summary, she went home and cried silently in the bathroom, not from sadness, but because someone had seen competence where Daniel had only seen dependence. By then, she had stopped looking west every night toward Hawthorne Lane. Not because she had forgotten it, because she had begun walking toward it in a way no one else could see. Margaret Hale entered Emily's life on a Tuesday afternoon when the rain had turned the sidewalks silver and the copier at the small law office jammed for the third time before lunch. Emily was kneeling beside the machine with toner on her fingers, coaxing out a wrinkled stack of foreclosure notices, when a woman's voice behind her said, "Most people pull too hard and tear the page. You waited for the roller to release it." Emily looked up and saw a tall woman in a charcoal wool coat, her gray hair swept into a low knot, her posture so straight it made the cluttered reception area seem suddenly underdressed. She was older than Daniel's crowd, older than the polished women who used to float through Hawthorne Lane with perfect smiles and empty questions, but there was nothing fragile about her. Her eyes were clear, pale, and unsentimental. Emily stood too quickly, brushing toner from her hands onto a paper towel. "I am sorry. Are you here to see Mr. Levin?" The woman glanced toward the hallway where Emily's boss was arguing gently with a client over speakerphone. "No, I am here to see who wrote this title summary." She held up a folder with Emily's neat blue notes clipped to the front. For one breath, Emily felt the old instinct to shrink. Praise had become dangerous in her marriage, usually followed by correction, suspicion, or a reminder not to get ahead of herself. "I did," she said carefully. "Was there a problem?" Margaret studied her for a moment, not unkindly, but closely, the way a jeweler might study a stone before deciding where the light lived inside it. "There were 3 problems," she said. Emily's stomach tightened. "And you found all of them." That was how Emily learned Margaret Hale was not simply another client. She owned Hale Property Solutions, a quiet but respected firm that specialized in distressed homes, estate sales, tax liens, and the complicated places where family grief met paperwork. She had been a real estate attorney for 32 years before stepping away from courtrooms to build something smaller and sharper. "People think houses are emotional," Margaret told Emily later that week. sitting across from her in a corner booth at a diner that smelled of coffee and grilled onions. They are. But on paper, they are also timelines. Follow the dates, and the truth usually stops hiding. Emily listened with both hands wrapped around a mug she could barely afford, afraid to move too much in case the moment disappeared. Margaret had asked her to bring examples of her work. Emily brought every clean file she had, organized by property address, lien status, and recording date. She expected a polite compliment, maybe advice. Instead, Margaret turned pages in silence, then said, "You see patterns." Emily blinked. "I suppose I learned to." "No," Margaret said, tapping the folder. "Some people collect information. You understand what information is trying to become." The words settled somewhere deep in Emily, somewhere Daniel's voice had not managed to reach. For years, she had been told she was too emotional, too soft, too dependent, too grateful for a life she had not earned. Yet here was this severe, silver-haired woman looking at the same hands that clipped coupons and packed lunches and saying they could build something. Margaret did not offer pity. That was why Emily trusted her. Pity had soft edges and often came with an expiration date. Margaret offered work. Real work. She offered Emily 10 hours a week reviewing county records from home after the children slept, then 15, then a part-time position with flexible hours and a higher hourly rate than Emily had ever been paid. The first evening Emily logged into the firm's database from the kitchen table above the laundromat. Noah leaned over her shoulder and asked if she had a new job. Emily looked at the screen, at the columns of addresses and debts and dates, at the little brass key hanging from its pushpin nearby. "Yes," she said. "I think I do." Lily, coloring on the floor in pajamas with moons on them, looked up. "Is it a good job?" Emily thought of Margaret's calm voice, the diner's yellow light, the strange dignity of being chosen for skill instead of rescued from sadness. "It is a beginning," she said. And for the first time in a long while, the word did not frighten her. The first time Emily saw the address again, it was not on a memory, a photograph, or a school form she had forgotten to update. It was buried in a foreclosure packet on Margaret Hale's secure database, sitting between a ranch house in New Britain and a duplex in Manchester, written in plain black type, as if it did not know how much power it still had over her. 214, Hawthorne Lane. Emily's hand went still on the mouse. The apartment above the laundromat was quiet except for the low rumble of dryers beneath the floor and the soft scratch of Noah's pencil at the kitchen table. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with a library book open across her chest, her little brass key charm resting against the blanket. It was late October, almost 2 years after the night in the motel, and outside the window the streetlights shone through a thin mist that made everything look distant. Emily read the address once, then again, then a third time, slower, as though the letters might rearrange themselves into someplace else if she gave them the chance. They did not. Margaret had taught her never to react to a file before understanding it, so Emily forced herself to breathe and opened the documents. Mortgage modification denied. Second lien recorded. Tax escrow shortage. Commercial loan cross-collateralized against residential property. Delinquency notice. Pending auction. Each page was a brick falling from a wall Daniel had once insisted would stand forever. Emily read through the night, not with satisfaction, but with a kind of solemn clarity. Daniel had not lost the house because of one bad month or one unlucky deal. He had turned it into a shield for his image, then into a wallet for his risks, then into collateral for a business expansion he could not sustain. He had borrowed against the very place he told the world represented stability. He had signed papers with the confidence of a man who believed consequences were for other people. By midnight, Emily had a timeline written in her notebook. By 1 o'clock, she had traced the lending chain. By 2, she understood why the bank was moving quickly. Hawthorne Lane was no longer Daniel's crown. It was a distressed asset with a beautiful porch. The realization should have felt like revenge. It did not. Revenge would have been hot, bright, reckless. What Emily felt was colder and heavier. She looked across the room at Noah, who had fallen asleep over his homework, his cheek pressed against a page of long division. He was 11 now, taller, guarded in the way children become when they learn adults can disappoint them. Lily was 8, still tender, still keeping the brass key close as if losing it might make the past vanish before they were ready. Emily stood and gently covered Noah with a blanket, then lifted the book from Lily's chest. For a moment, the glow from the laptop painted the apartment blue, catching on the chipped mug, the stack of bills, the school calendar pinned to the refrigerator. This small life had asked everything from her. It had taken sleep, pride, comfort, and nearly all of her softness. But it had given something back. Skill, patience, eyes that could read danger before it introduced itself. The next morning, Emily brought the file to Margaret's office before the sun had fully risen. Margaret was already there, as always, standing by the window with a paper cup of coffee and a legal pad tucked beneath one arm. She did not look surprised when Emily placed the packet on her desk. Women like Margaret had lived long enough to know that certain doors found their way back. She read the first page, then looked up. "You know this property." It was not a question. Emily nodded. "I live there." Margaret's eyes softened for half a second, then returned to business. That was her mercy, never making Emily feel fragile in rooms where she needed to be sharp. "Do you want me to remove you from the file?" Emily looked down at the address, at the digits that had once sat on birthday invitations and utility bills and legal papers that erased her. She thought of Daniel's voice in the entryway. She thought of Lily's mitten closing around the little brass heart. She thought of a promise made in a motel room while highway lights moved across the ceiling. "No," Emily said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not move. "I want to understand every inch of it." Margaret studied her for a long moment. "Understanding is not the same as chasing pain." "I know," Emily said. "This is not about pain anymore." And when she said it, she realized it was true. The house was still a wound, but it was also numbers, deadlines, clauses, and opportunity. Daniel had believed ownership meant power because his name had been printed on the deed. Emily had learned that real power began much earlier, in the patience to read what others ignored. She picked up the packet again, and the paper no longer felt like a ghost. It felt like a door. Emily did not bid on Hawthorne Lane with a miracle. There was no wealthy stranger stepping out of a black car, no sudden inheritance, no dramatic rescue dressed in a tailored suit. The plan began at her kitchen table above the laundromat, beneath the yellow light that made every document look older than it was, with Noah asleep on the couch, Lily breathing softly in the bedroom, and the little brass key hanging from its pushpin like a question waiting for an answer. Margaret had warned her that wanting a property was never enough. Wanting made people careless. Numbers made them honest. So Emily built the file the way she had rebuilt her life, one clean line at a time. She listed the outstanding debt, the unpaid taxes, the bank's reserve price, the repair estimates, the neighborhood comparables, the school district value, the probable resale range, and every deadline that could not be missed. She did not let herself write the word home anywhere in the packet. Not once. On paper, it had to be an asset. In her heart, it could remain something else. Carter Holdings began as a name on a state registration form and a $60 filing fee that made Emily hesitate before pressing submit because $60 still meant something to her. She chose Carter because it belonged to the children too, because it was the name she had kept after Daniel tried to make it feel small. Margaret helped her structure the purchase through a modest partnership with two local investors who trusted Emily's research more than Daniel had ever trusted her judgment. They were not glamorous people. One owned a small roofing company in Wethersfield. The other was a retired school principal who had spent years buying and restoring neglected duplexes. They did not ask about Emily's past. They asked about risk, title, financing, and exit strategy. Emily answered every question with the steady precision of someone who had spent years being underestimated and had decided to become fluent in the language that once excluded her. The hardest part was not the paperwork. It was telling the children just enough. Noah found her one evening surrounded by folders, her calculator beside a half-eaten piece of toast, her eyes red from lack of sleep. He looked at the address on the top page before she could cover it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The apartment hummed beneath them, washers spinning downstairs, traffic passing wet and slow outside. "Are we going back?" he asked. Emily folded her hands on the table so he would not see them tremble. "I am trying to make sure that, if we do, it is because we choose to, not because we need anything from him." Noah's face changed at the word him. He was old enough now to understand that some absences had names. What if Dad says no? Emily looked at the documents, at the foreclosure notices Daniel could not charm away, at the deadlines already moving without his permission. This time, it is not his decision alone. Lily heard about it the next morning and immediately brought down the brass key, laying it beside Emily's coffee as if it were part of the financing. For luck, she said. Emily wanted to tell her that luck had very little to do with county filings and capital calls, but instead she kissed the top of her head and left it there. Weeks passed in a blur of calls, signatures, revised terms, and quiet nerves. Emily worked late at Margaret's office, the windows dark around her, reviewing the bid until the numbers stopped looking like numbers and started looking like a bridge. There were moments when fear rose fast and familiar, whispering that she was reaching too high, that women like her were allowed survival, but not return. Each time, Margaret's voice cut through the doubt. Do not confuse fear with warning. Warning brings information. Fear brings noise. So Emily listened for information. She adjusted the offer. She secured proof of funds. She confirmed the lien releases. She prepared for every possible objection Daniel's attorney might raise. When the final private bid package was ready, Emily stood alone in Margaret's conference room with the signed documents in front of her. Snow had begun to fall outside, softening the Hartford rooftops, turning the city quiet. She thought of the night rain on the driveway, of Noah's wet books, of Lily's mitten closing around a key that no longer opened anything. Then she signed her name. Emily Carter. Not Mrs. Whitmore. Not the woman Daniel had left outside. Just Emily Carter, written in blue ink with a hand that did not shake. And when Margaret sealed the envelope, Emily understood that she was not buying the past back. She was purchasing the right to decide what it would become. The auction room in Hartford felt smaller now that the past had caught up with the present. Emily sat with the sealed calm of someone who had already walked through the hardest door, while the rest of the room shifted around her in low murmurs and paper rustles. On the screen, Hawthorne Lane remained bright and composed, its front porch washed in winter sunlight, its red oak door waiting with the patience of things that outlive people's mistakes. Daniel sat in the first row, but the performance had begun to slip from his shoulders. His attorney leaned close, speaking in clipped whispers, and Daniel nodded too quickly, the way he used to nod at school fundraisers when he did not understand the details but wanted everyone to believe he did. Vanessa was not beside him. Emily noticed that before she wanted to. There was no cream coat, no polished smile, no hand resting possessively on the back of his chair. The woman who had once stood beneath Emily's chandelier, as if she had inherited the air itself, had disappeared when the house stopped looking like a prize. Daniel had come alone, and loneliness did not flatter him. He turned halfway in his seat again, his eyes finding Emily with more irritation than surprise this time. For a moment, he simply stared, as if trying to make sense of the children's clean clothes, Emily's ivory coat, the leather folder in her lap, and the absence of desperation on her face. Then he rose. His attorney reached for his sleeve, but Daniel shook him off with a small, impatient motion and walked down the aisle toward her. The room washed without admitting it. Pens paused. Conversations thinned. Emily felt Noah stiffen beside her. Lily's hand slipped around the little brass key charm at her wrist. Daniel stopped a few feet away, close enough for Emily to catch the scent of his cologne, the same expensive cedar and citrus that once filled their bedroom closet and later made her stomach tighten in grocery aisles when strangers passed too near. Emily, he said, lowering his voice into the old private tone he had used when he wanted to control a public moment. This is not the place. She looked up at him. For what? His jaw moved once. He glanced at Noah and Lily, then back at her, uncomfortable with their eyes on him. For whatever statement you think you are making, the old Emily might have explained. She might have rushed to prove she had not come for revenge, that she had not brought the children to embarrass him, that she was reasonable, decent, still worthy of being treated gently. This Emily let the silence stand. Daniel's face tightened. Come to watch, then? He asked, forcing a small laugh that landed badly. Still sentimental about the place? Noah looked down at his shoes, but Emily felt his anger through the pressure of his hand against hers. Lily stared at Daniel openly, not with hatred, but with the solemn confusion of a child trying to reconcile a face with a memory that never became safe. Emily's voice, when it came, was quiet enough that Daniel had to lean in to hear it. No, I came because I had business here. Something flickered in his eyes. Suspicion, then dismissal. Business. He repeated the word as if it belonged to him, and she had mispronounced it. You work for Hale now, do you not? Is this one of Margaret's little distressed property errands? Across the room, Margaret sat near the side aisle in a dark navy suit, her silver hair pinned neatly, her expression unreadable. She did not move, but Emily knew she was listening. Daniel noticed her too and seemed to regain a scrap of confidence. You should be careful, he said. People like Margaret make women like you think paperwork is the same as power. Emily almost smiled then, not because it was funny, but because his cruelty had become so predictable it no longer knew how to surprise her. Before she could answer, the auctioneer called the room to attention. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed with the final confirmation of sale. Daniel turned sharply toward the front, irritation giving way to urgency. He walked back to his seat, smoothing his jacket as though fabric could restore dignity. Emily looked at Noah and Lily. Are you okay? Noah nodded, too proud to speak. Lily whispered, he sounds smaller. Emily pressed her lips together, feeling the ache and strange tenderness of that truth. At the podium, the auctioneer opened a folder. Daniel leaned forward, fingers locked together. He still believed the contest was between himself and the bank, between his charm and their numbers, between the man he used to be and the consequences he hoped to delay. He did not yet understand that the room had already moved on without him. Emily placed her folder on her lap, the signed copies inside smooth beneath her palm. The private bid had been accepted. The financing had cleared. The documents had been reviewed so many times she knew the order of the pages by touch. Yet as the auctioneer adjusted the microphone, her heart gave one hard, human beat. Not from fear, from the nearness of a promise about to become visible. Daniel looked back once more, and this time Emily did not look away. The door had closed on her children in the rain. Now the room was about to hear whose name would open it. The auctioneer's voice moved through the room with polished neutrality, but to Emily it sounded as distant as weather. After review of all submitted materials, proof of funds, and lien resolution terms, the highest qualified private bid has been accepted by the lender. A thin murmur passed across the rows. Daniel sat straighter, his shoulders lifting as if the sentence had been written for him. For one brief second, Emily could see the man he used to perform so well, the man who believed rooms would turn toward him if he waited long enough. He adjusted his cuff, glanced at his attorney, and prepared his face for relief. Then the auctioneer looked down at the page. The winning bidder is Carter Holdings. Silence did not fall all at once. It moved slowly, row by row, like a curtain being drawn. Someone near the aisle stopped tapping a pen. A banker lifted her head. Daniel's attorney blinked and turned toward the back of the room before Daniel did. Carter Holdings. The name hung there. Simple and impossible. Daniel's expression tightened first with confusion, then impatience, as if reality had made a clerical error. Excuse me, he said, rising halfway from his chair. His voice was too loud for the room. There must be some mistake. The auctioneer remained composed. There is no mistake, Mr. Whitmore. The sale has been confirmed. Daniel looked to his attorney, but the man's face had gone pale with professional understanding. He knew. Perhaps he had known for several seconds already and was only now deciding how to survive being the messenger. A representative from the lender stood with a folder in hand and walked not toward Daniel, but down the center aisle toward Emily. The sound of her heels against the floor was delicate, almost ceremonial. Emily felt Noah go completely still beside her. Lily's breath caught in a tiny, audible way. Margaret, from the side row, did not smile, but her chin lifted by the smallest fraction. The lender's representative stopped in front of Emily and offered the folder with both hands. Mrs. Carter, congratulations. The property transfer is ready for final closing as scheduled. Emily stood. Not quickly, not dramatically. She rose the way she had learned to rise after years of being expected to remain seated. Her ivory coat fell cleanly around her, and for the first time that morning, the room saw her not as Daniel Whitmore's former wife, not as a woman attached to an old scandal, not as a quiet employee from Margaret Hale's firm, but as the person whose name had just changed the shape of the room. Daniel turned fully now. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Emily as if seeing a language he had once mocked and now could not read. Emily, he said. This time there was no private tone, no smooth command, no practiced softness. Just her name, bare and unprepared. She accepted the folder, feeling the weight of paper against her fingers. "Thank you," she said to the representative. Her voice was even, but inside her chest something trembled, not with weakness, but with the force of a long-carried burden setting itself down. Daniel stepped into the aisle. "How?" The word escaped him before pride could stop. "It." A few people turned to look at him, and he seemed to notice too late that the question made him smaller. Emily met his eyes. For a moment, she saw flashes of everything he had been. The charming husband at fundraisers, the impatient man at the kitchen table, the stranger in the foyer, the father who had looked away from his son. She could have told him about the laundromat apartment, the coupon envelopes, the nights she studied until the words blurred, the clients who trusted her, the investors who believed the numbers, the mentor who taught her that documents remembered what people denied. She could have made a speech sharp enough to draw blood without ever raising her voice. But that would have given him a place at the center of the story again, and he no longer belonged there. "Brick by brick," Emily said. The words were quiet, but they reached every corner of the room. Daniel stared at her, stunned by how little she needed to explain. His attorney touched his elbow, murmuring something about final terms, but Daniel did not move. He looked past Emily then, toward Noah and Lily, and for the first time in years, his children did not look like extensions of a dispute he wanted managed. They looked like witnesses. Noah stood beside his mother with his jaw set, no longer the little boy in a wet blue tie. Lily held the brass key charm at her wrist, her eyes wide but steady. Emily looked down at them, and the noise of the room faded again, replaced by the quiet promise from a motel room long ago. The folder in her hands was not the ending. It was only paper. The real moment was still waiting behind a red oak door. The final closing happened 2 weeks later on a clear Saturday morning, the kind of winter morning that made every bare branch look etched in silver. Emily drove to Hawthorne Lane herself, with Noah in the passenger seat and Lily in the back, both of them quieter than usual as the familiar streets began to gather around them. The neighborhood looked almost unchanged. The same stone mailboxes, the same trimmed hedges, the same wide lawn sleeping under a thin frost. But Emily felt the difference beneath her ribs. The last time she had driven away from this street, the rearview mirror had held a closed door, a porch light, and 2 children trying not to cry. This time, the deed was recorded, the locks had been changed, and a small envelope from the title company rested in her purse like a heartbeat. When the house came into view, Lily inhaled softly. The maple tree stood bare over the driveway, its branches reaching across the pale sky. Noah stared at the second-floor window, and Emily knew he was seeing the blue room, the shelf that had never been built, the boy he had been before disappointment taught him to be careful. She parked at the curb instead of the driveway. For a few seconds, no one moved. The engine ticked as it cooled. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and fell silent. Emily turned around to look at them both. "We do not have to go fast," she said. Noah nodded, but his eyes did not leave the house. Lily clutched the old brass key charm in her lap, polished smooth now from years of small fingers and worry. "Will it feel mad at us?" she asked. Emily's chest tightened at the way children gave feelings to places because people had made the places hurt. She reached back and touched Lily's knee. "No, sweetheart. Houses do not get mad. Sometimes they just wait." They stepped out into the cold. The air smelled of wood smoke and frozen grass. Emily walked around the car, not ahead of the children, but beside them. That mattered. This was not a march. It was a return, and every step belonged to all 3 of them. At the front gate, Noah slowed. His hand brushed the iron latch where he had once tied red ribbons for a school spirit week. Lily stopped near the porch railing and looked down at the spot where she had found the little brass key on the rain-black night everything changed. Emily saw the memory pass over her daughter's face, not as clearly as an adult would hold it, but enough. Enough to make her fingers close around the charm. The title company representative was waiting by the door with Margaret Hale, who wore a camel coat and gloves, her silver hair bright in the winter sun. Margaret did not say much. She never did when silence could carry more dignity. She only placed a hand briefly on Emily's shoulder and then stepped back. The representative smiled and handed Emily a small ring with 3 new keys. "All yours," she said. Such ordinary words. Such an impossible sound. Emily looked at the keys lying in her palm, clean and sharp, catching the morning light. For 1 second, She was back in the foyer, Daniel taking the old key from her hand. You will not need that. She could still hear his voice, still feel the children behind her, still see the rain shining on the brick step. Then Lily's mitten, the hidden brass heart, the motel room, the promise. Emily lowered herself to one knee on the porch, bringing her eyes level with Noah and Lily. Their faces were solemn, almost frightened by the weight of being trusted with something adults had once used to hurt them. Emily removed one new key from the ring and fastened it onto Lily's old brass charm. Then she placed it in her daughter's open palm. Lily stared at it, as if two versions of her life had suddenly been joined by metal. Emily gave the second key to Noah. He looked down at it for a long time, his fingers closing slowly around the silver edge. Is this really ours? He asked. Emily looked at the red oak door, at the maple tree, at the windows that had watched them leave and now watched them return. It is yours to feel safe in, she said. That matters more. Noah swallowed, then nodded. Lily stepped closer to the door, but waited. Emily understood. She rose and stood behind them, one hand on Noah's shoulder, one hand near Lily's back, close enough to steady, not close enough to lead. This house once watched you leave in the rain, she said softly. Today it watches you come home. Noah inserted his key first. His hand shook only a little. Lily placed her smaller hand over his, and together they turned it. The lock clicked open, clean and final, and Emily closed her eyes for one breath as sunlight spilled across the threshold. The door opened with a sound Emily felt more than heard, a quiet shift of wood and air, as if the house itself had taken a breath after holding one for years. For a moment, none of them stepped inside. Sunlight spread across the foyer floor in a pale gold rectangle, touching the baseboards, the staircase, the empty walls where photographs had once hung, and where shadows of other people's choices seemed finally ready to fade. The chandelier was still there, dim in the morning light, less grand than Emily remembered, less powerful. Noah crossed the threshold first, slowly, his sneakers making no sound on the polished floor. Lily followed with the old brass charm and the new key pressed together in her fist. Emily entered last. That mattered too. She had spent years going first into hard rooms, so her children would not be afraid. Today, they went first because the room belonged to them. The foyer smelled faintly of dust, lemon oil, and cold air. No flowers, no perfume, no polished performance. Just space. Honest, empty space. Noah walked to the coat closet and opened it. Emily knew what he was looking for before he reached behind the door. The pencil marks were still there, faint but visible, thin lines with dates beside them in Emily's handwriting. Noah, age 6. Noah, age 7. Lily, age 3, with a crooked star beside her name because she had insisted she was not just taller, she was sparkling. Noah touched the marks with 2 fingers, and his face changed in a way Emily could not fully read. They did not paint over it, he said. Emily stood beside him, close enough to see the boy he had been and the young man he was becoming occupy the same fragile space. No, she said. They did not. Lily wandered into the living room, where the winter sun fell across the bare floor. She turned in a slow circle, her eyes searching for furniture that was gone, curtains that were gone, a life that had been removed piece by piece. Then she knelt near the window and pointed at a tiny scratch in the wood. My doll carriage, she whispered. Emily smiled, but her throat ached. I remember. Margaret remained outside on the porch, giving them the mercy of privacy, but a few minutes later another car rolled to the curb. Emily saw it through the front window before she heard the engine stop. Daniel. He stepped out wearing a dark overcoat, his hands empty, his face stripped of the certainty that had once made him seem taller than other men. He did not approach right away. He stood near the sidewalk, looking at the house as if it had become a country whose language he no longer spoke. Noah saw him too, and his shoulders tightened. Emily touched his back. You do not have to talk to him today. Noah nodded, but did not move away. Daniel finally walked up the path, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked at Emily through the open doorway, then at the children behind her. For once, he seemed to understand that stepping inside was not his right. Emily, he said, and the name carried no command now. Only regret, late and thin in the cold air. I just wanted to say I am sorry. The words landed softly, not enough to undo anything, not enough to reopen anything, but perhaps enough to prove that even pride could grow tired. Emily walked to the threshold. She did not close the door. She did not invite him in. The morning light rested between them like a line drawn by something wiser than anger. "I hope you mean that," she said. Daniel swallowed. His eyes moved toward Noah, then Lily. "I do." Lily stayed near the living room window. Noah stood by the closet marks, one hand holding his new key. Neither child spoke. Emily let that silence remain theirs. Daniel looked down, and for the first time, the house did not make him look powerful. It made him look like a man standing outside what he had failed to cherish. "I lost everything," he said quietly. Emily looked back at the foyer, at the children, at the marks on the wall and the sunlight on the floor. Then she turned to him again. "No, Daniel," she said, without cruelty. "You did not lose everything. You lost the people who made it mean something." His face tightened, but he nodded once, as if the truth had finally reached a place charm could not protect. He stepped back from the porch. Emily watched him go, not with triumph, not with pity, but with a calm so complete it felt almost unfamiliar. Then she closed the door, gently this time, from the inside. Behind her, Lily opened the living room windows to let in the cold, clean air. Noah found the old package of glow-in-the-dark stars in a closet box someone had missed, still unopened after all these years. Emily laughed then, a small astonished sound that filled the empty foyer and made both children look at her. That afternoon, they ordered pizza and ate it on paper plates on the floor. Lily taped a new drawing to the refrigerator, 3 figures in front of a red door, each holding a key. Noah placed the first glow-in-the-dark star above his bedroom window. Emily stood in the hallway after sunset and watched the tiny star begin to shine. She had not come back to prove Daniel wrong, though he had been. She had not come back to impress the neighbors, though the curtains across the street had certainly moved. She had come back for a promise made under motel lights to 2 children who deserved to know that being pushed out was not the same as being erased. And when the house grew quiet that night, it no longer sounded haunted. It sounded held.